There's a certain lens of understanding,
Right.
and then there's a certain lens of human nature.
Right.
To say, all right, well, what is this? What does this say?
Facts.
Not what did they say?
Right.
What does this say?
Yep.
Right. And there can be a lot of things or a lot of ways that people act, and sometimes it's not even their own fault. Like, you're dealing with your lady or something like this, and all of a sudden, there'll be a certain behavior. And you got to say to yourself, what does this say versus what did she say?
And that's, yeah, man.
Right. So and people do it all the time. Like I remember one time I was going, I think it was a job interview. This is years ago. I think it was a job interview. And I remember going, and I remember being early and not just being on time, being early, right? Because, we've all probably had that man in our life that said early is on time is late is unacceptable, right?
Facts.
And I remember specifically not thinking too hard or too deep about the psychology of it, and being made to wait, right? Being made to wait in the waiting room before this interview, and what message is that sending? Then being taken to a room and waiting again, right? And then that person coming in, a certain amount of time later with no intent or remorse for what was done. I mean, a lot of it will experience that at the dentist office or something, right? It's like,
yeah,
right. It's like, well, I understand, but what is this air of smugness, right? Like, I'm paying you for a service,
right?
And I'm waiting here. I'm on time for my appointment, and now you're projecting at me like, we'll get to you when we get to you, right? Like, what does that say versus what did they say? So I think that's a big takeaway. If you can get to the point of being able to analyze situations around you, take yourself out of the situation. That's the hardest part. The biggest challenge is, how do you remove yourself from the situation? How do you pull yourself out of the interaction, the argument, the boardroom, whatever it is? How do you pull yourself out of that, and then objectively, not subjectively, objectively be able to say, what does that say? What does that person's behavior say? What does that say about my relationship with that person? What does that say about the level of importance that they feel I have in their life? What does that say in the level of power that I think I have or don't have in this institution, right? And I think it's an important thing to do, and then be able to make decisions on it, leaving emotion aside, right? That's the toughest part. Like, if you can remove yourself and you're dating a lady and you're saying, what does this say? This says she don't respect you, my man. That's what that says. That's not what she said, but that's what that says. But now, can you be objective about it and make a decision based on what that says versus what they said? And there's a lot of nuance to that. How do you read the situation and read people? You're good at that too. Remember, we had a couple conversations. You're like, you might want to consider this, because you're reading the situation, and you're like, hey, I saw this, and what I believe that says is this, as opposed to what they said. And I think it's an important skill that we always need to keep trying to make better.
Oh, yeah. I think discernment is continuous. It's continuously trying to figure it out. It's not like, I think that comes with wisdom and experience, when you can just make critical decisions, high efficiency all the time. But generally comes with a little sense of like feeling it intuitively, and then putting some mental logic to it. And then also taking what they said, based on like their intention, but then kind of looking at these behaviors like, I don't know if that's lining up. You know what I mean? But no, it goes a long way with just like the energy, feeling where people are coming from, and that's having grace for people. You can have grace a lot of the times, especially for personal problems. Like, I think we all have a storage room of grace as humans for people going through something personal, right? Even if it bleeds on us, we're like, okay, I get it, but let me be compassionate. I understand, right? If you're struggling with this, okay, I can choose or choose not to be around or involved with that. I can or cannot handle that struggle. But if you're struggling with this, maybe I can be a area of support.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just making that personal call of like, when it becomes a little bit too distracting, even like the feeling of being disrespected becomes too distracting for the relationship to continue. Like, you might have to struggle with that on your own. I don't know. But, also governing yourself so that we don't get lost in too many thoughts that are unnecessary, right? Aren't gonna keep us in the right headspace.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we could take somebody's personal challenges that they're dealing with, right, but then absorb it negatively
Right.
and either overreact or underreact. But it's the conversation based on what we chose to do that distracts us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
dang, should I have overreacted? Should I have under? Did I underreact too much? It's all of that, and then it gets to the point where just kind of release and let people be people.
Yeah.
You know.
And along those lines, I was thinking about this the other day, was whether or not empathy is really as good as people say it is. And what I mean by that is, do we? And I think this is going to be depending on the person. Do we sometimes give too much grace?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is the masculine imperative to be empathetic at all times? Right? Because if or is that more of a feminine quality of empathy, of feeling what that person feels? Because empathy didn't build kingdoms,
Just for sure.
right? Empathy didn't build, the roadways,
Yeah.
and decision making did. Hard decisions did. So the question is that can you have discernment of a situation? Can you have understanding of a situation? But can empathy end up becoming a weakness if you go to it too much? And here's what I mean is that if you're driving down the road and you want to be empathetic of every flat tire, you never get to where you need to go, right? Because you're having empathy because you've had a flat tire at times.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you harness that energy and say, you know what, empathy is only going to take you so far. Now you're just looking for sympathy. So like, where's the line between empathy and sympathy? So again, I don't know the answer, but the older I get, the more from the masculine journey perspective, I'm looking at it like maybe empathy isn't the best quality or the number one quality to go to at all times. Because if you just give out grace with everything, then you never have standards. And some of the highest achievers in the world, depending on how much a person wants to achieve, right? For Jordan, Steve Jobs, Conor McGregor, guys that have achieved at a high level have had to have standards and don't necessarily want to be empathetic all the time to people. They just want to be like, this is the way it is. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm doing. And then just going after it. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think there's a thin line in the same respect of how much turning the other cheek is too much turning of the cheek.
True.
How much grace is too much grace?
Yeah.
How much empathy is too much empathy? And I think that then goes back to what we said earlier of how do you build the practice of pulling yourself out of a situation and looking at it objectively from above and then being able to make decisions that way. And I think what that does is that eliminates certain parts of the emotionality, right?
1,000%.
What's empathy? I mean, the word empathy starts with emotion, right? So you're almost associating the emotion that that person has and you're feeling their pain, right? That's the point of empathy, I believe, right? Empathy is like, no, you understand, but you're feeling that person's pain. Like, is that helpful? I don't know the answer. Versus, can you be understanding? Can you have enough wisdom to remove yourself from a situation, look at it from the top objectively, and be able to make a decision based on that, rather than going into empathy, which is what we've been taught for the last 50 years, of like, no, you want to understand that person, feel what that person's going through, or the other perspective is no, you need to learn to remove yourself from situations, look at things objectively, and then make decisions, which can sometimes be for the greater good, right? If you're running a hospital, you can't be in the ER. If you're running the hospital, right? You can't be in the emergency room. You can't be empathetic for the little girl with a tummy ache, right? You can't be empathetic for the kid that just got into a motorcycle accident and his leg is broken and shattered, right? There's a certain level that you have to decide that you have to detach yourself because your responsibility and what you want to achieve and what you want to lead is bigger than the empathy of anything and everyone around us. So if you want to run that hospital, you have to be able to be objective to the situations around you. Pull yourself out of it and say, look, I understand completely, comma, in order for us to keep this ICU going, we need to shut down the tummy ache department. Sorry. tummy ache department's getting shut because we need to keep the ICU department open because we only have so much energy, right? Because that's a decision you have to make objectively because you know that the hospital needs to run and can only run on so much electricity because there's a storm. So that energy has to go to the ICU and not to the tummy ache department. Not an easy decision, but again, I think it's a decision if you can remove yourself objectively and look from above and say decisions have to be made and they're not going to be easy. No one's going to, not everyone's going to be happy, but I think those are going to be the toughest decisions in life.
Absolutely. And drew a lot of points down. Is just trying to figure out where to lead it. I really like the breakdown of empathy because you don't want to be taken advantage of. You don't want to be mistreated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when we get on the sake of it being too empathetic, it's almost like, okay, are we being taken for granted now, right? Are we being mistreated, or is somebody taking this empathetic, the kindness, are they taking that for weakness? Are they trying to now be, they manipulative? You know what I mean? Are they leveraging this role as manipulation to get a desired outcome? And that's what we want to protect ourselves from. Being empathetic is also, we receive from that as well, right? We feel good by giving. We're natural givers as humans. We always feel good like helping another man, or you going over helping like somebody fix a tire and they're joyous. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Like we walk away, we feeling high, right? That's a little spiritual deposit. So we all want to be empathetic to a degree. Right. But I think to your point is not being too empathetic to where now you're not only distracting yourself, you're also now kind of the integrity. You're damaging your own integrity if you're too kind all the time.
Right.
And I had a conversation with a young lady. She was dating a young man, and she was asking me some feedback and about what she should do and if it's okay, she should be okay with certain things. And I said, as long as you have a really good, and it's something you said that led me into self-governing our lives. So we talk about leaders making tough decisions. Right, not always making the easy decision. It's easy to be a people pleaser. If somebody needs help, to help. Right, be empathetic and always help. But when you are helping at the expense of yourself, to where now you're withdrawing from your own spiritual bank, I think that's when it's too much. I think now we all have a threshold to say 10% to go and give to others, right? Like tithing, right? Tithe 10%. Don't mean that 90% of your money still ain't in the bank. No, just 10 is going over here, right, to your spiritual investment.
Yeah.
We can spiritually invest empathetically, not 10%, right? In order to be a leader, you have to be willing to, what you said, like you got to be willing to make decisions that aren't easy, that are tough. And sometimes in a position to where you could be empathetic, but it's not advantageous to the business of you, right? You're self-governing yourself. You're leading your life, your business. You got to focus. We're heading in a direction. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Leaders have a responsibility. It's not easy, warm, and fuzzy all the time to be a good leader. And so I think that's one critical component of leadership. Do you have the toughness required to make the right call at the right time, when to be kind and when not to be? Because sometimes being kind in the wrong moment, being overly empathetic in the wrong moment now can mess up the integrity of the boundaries. And if we don't have boundaries, then how are we defining what we're doing, our mission, our goal, our lives, ourselves, our name? How are you defining yourself if you have no boundaries? And so I think as long as you're being empathetic within your personal guidelines and your personal boundaries of what you will and will not allow, foundationally, I think you're in a safe zone. But I think once people are pulling you outside of that zone, like I've been empathetic about 7 times for the same reason. Starting to make me feel now like by allowing this behavior, now I'm going to start feeling less than about myself. Boom. I think that's the limit. Boom. Move on.
Start resenting
cut it
person.
Off, right? Because now it's going into a negative realm. Now it might be time for somebody else to assist them in that area. I've given as much assistance as I can in that area. I can maybe help somewhere else, but I did my best. Boom, 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 boom.
And that goes to be what we said also, like, how do you remove yourself from the situation?
That's very tough.
Right? Like, how do you pull yourself out of the situation? Maybe a client, right? Client no-shows a bunch of times, right? How do you pull yourself out of that situation and realistically answer what next steps need to be done?
For sure.
Period. End of story. And that's the only reason why I started the conversation, where I think the modern narrative is everything's empathy and empathy and empathy and empathy, where it's like, I understand, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that it's a bad quality. Empathy is a great quality, as is forgiveness is a great quality. Now, I think forgiveness is a much different quality than empathy is. I think it's much different. It's
Mm-hmm.
feeling that other person and putting yourself in their shoes. But I think you can do that. But then also, it's also implying that somehow you can affect what moves they're going to make. And I think that that's disastrous. So if we can put ourselves in their shoes for a minute, and it was something that I heard the other day, and somebody said to me like, "Well, you don't seem like you trust people, right?" And
Mm-hmm.
my response, which got a little bit of kickback, was, no. I absolutely trust people. I trust people to be who they are,
Yep.
and I trust people to always be looking out for their best intention. Period. End of story. Their best intention.
For sure.
Now, I can also be empathetic and say, this person, I'm going to trust them to do what's best for them in every situation. Every person on earth, whether it be a little kid who's going to be like, well, and because little kids have no filter,
Not at all.
right? If you buy a little kid a gift and they don't like it, they'll look at it like, right? They'll
Okay.
tell you,
Thanks.
they'll be like, nah, like this is ugly. Like they'll tell you that, right? We've become socialized to the point where we have to be careful of, like we're concerned about different things
For
once we
sure.
get a little older, right? And I'm not saying one is right or wrong, and I'm not saying we need to go back to being children. We live in a civilized society, so we can't just go back to doing what we want, and because we've all agreed to live in a society,
Big time.
or we've all been voluntold that we're living in a society together, right? And people can still listen. If you want to go to some land out in Wyoming and rough it yourself and don't get the benefits of living in a society, knock yourself
Good
out.
luck to you.
Knock yourself out. There's no one stopping you from doing that either. But if you want to play by the rules of this game of society that's been built, there's certain parameters that you have to abide by,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I think rule number one is really understanding that people are going to do what is in their best interest.
Yep.
99.9% of the time, it's going to be what's in their best interest. And I think that even the people that are very generous, the people that are very charitable, the people that, work for nonprofits, again, I still believe, to your point, was what feeling do they get for helping someone change that tire? Right?
Big
So there's
time.
a certain amount of self interest someone has at times in helping people.
Yep.
Now, I think you can look at that not necessarily from a lens of shock, of thinking it's some immoral thing. It's at times being able to objectively say, what does this person need, and then how does what they need align with also where I'm going as well. So I'll give an example, is that you may have um, a father, your father in your life,
Yeah.
wants to feel like he's still providing for his sons, right? And when you go somewhere, are you gonna dare reach for the bill, right? You're like, no, pop got the, you know what I mean? Something like that, where you can be 100 situations, you could be making two, three, four, five times the amount of money that your father's making. But what ends up happening, right? That bill comes, and he's like, I got it. And do you fight him for it? No. When he tries to slip you $20 for gas, and in your mind, your Ford Raptor is a buck 50, but $20 for gas. Now we could take it as, oh well, he doesn't think I'm making enough money. He doesn't know I'm successful, right? Okay, that's one way to take it. Or scoffing, like, what am I going to do with $20? Come on, Dad, that's $20. It takes 150 to take it there. Or another perspective is, hey, thanks, Pop.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you, man. No. Of course, yeah, I'm gonna go put some gas in the car now, right? So, what? How can we then use empathy to realize people are gonna do what is best for them, and in that situation, how can we also assist them get what they need? And in that situation, he just needed a sense of being able to provide for his son. And so what you did is you subjugated your ego. And that's why I really like the word subjugate, because it's not about killing your ego. It's not about convincing yourself that ego is the
That's a
enemy.
good word.
It's subjugating your ego per situational, per the situation. But maybe when you get on that court and you need to turn on the ego, you need to become Black Mamba.
You gotta cut
You
it
need to
on.
become right.
Yeah.
And you could turn that ego on and you could become a killer, right? And you can say to yourself, there's no possible way you're gonna beat me. You can become the Muhammad Ali. You can become the Conor McGregor. But the question is whether or not you have the power and the authority over your own actions to be able to harness it and dial it in when you need to. So therein lies the question. When do you need to dial up the ego and dial down the ego? Right? That's why, when I had text earlier, I put the dial in idea. So if we start to look at things like and the word that I've always used that we've used 100 times together is spectrum.
Yep.
I've always been like, it's a spectrum, right? Like
Yep.
it's pride and humility. It's where am I on the spectrum of pride and humility?
For sure.
Where am I on the spectrum of greed and charity?
Big time.
Where am I on the spectrum of love and lust? Right? They're just spectrums, right? And now this idea of a dial, if it's a single feeling.
Right.
So for example, if we look at it like the 7 deadly sins and we say, okay, well, how am I from the, chastity versus gluttony, right? Or lust, I should say. Chastity versus lust. Like, well, man, when I go to Miami, I'm eking to lust. Okay, you put yourself in a lustful environment.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that. And now you go to Utah and you're like, oh wow, like it's not so hard to be like, well, right, because you're not in an area with women walking around 98% naked. So you've made that on that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's one thing, now we can use dial. All right. So let's just think of ego. Sometimes you got to dial up the ego. Sometimes you got to dial down the ego. Right. Instead of making it this stark idea of ego is the enemy, or this stark idea of you need to kill your ego in order. Or here's another perspective. I understand completely what all those are saying. I don't disagree with them at all. I'm not saying that your ego should run you, right? Those are the people that say kill your ego. Your ego is running your decisions. Kill it. Or harness it, subjugate it, make it work for you, right?
Big time.
It's like judo,
For sure.
jujitsu. Coming at me, I'm going to use that force against you.
Right.
Right. That could be the ego. Instead of just be like, no, kill your ego. What you're supposed to do is kill your ego. Ego's the enemy. Never listen to your ego. Your ego is thinking this and that. Really? Is that the highest achievers in history have had a sense of ego? But somehow you're going to now tell, even from the age of a little kid, that no, that's a terrible thing to have. I don't understand that. It's too simple. It's too simple. Versus saying, think of ego as a dial. And when do you need to, I'm sure people will be like, Mach, you need to dial down the ego to right now, in my opinion. And I might be like, nope, I need to dial it up.
That's a very interesting viewpoint, and I like it. And now it just makes you want to expand on it a little bit more, because ego is definitely something that I believe is powerful. And maybe if we separate it and say, in the area of self-interest, things that we are doing that are fueled heavily through our own self-interest. We're trying to do something, go something, build something, create something for us, for part of how we view our purpose, our mission, our goal, whatever. But I think for self-interest, it has been highlighted in order to achieve a lot in the self-interest area, right? For you, ego has shown to be a helpful source of energy.
Why not?
Right? Because it also attributed to confidence,
Sure.
Self-confidence, right? And how you overcome barriers and hurdles and challenges that will put out the fire of self-confidence and self-esteem. So you almost need a protector, a guard, a security guard at the front of your heart that could be the ego, right? We give them a doggone, superhero costume, the ego, hey, it protects the heart, right? From things that are going to make us feel less than. Maybe now in the sense of connectivity, maybe now with connecting, because them saying ego is the enemy, I understand where they're trying to come from,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do I agree with the blanket statement? A little bit misleading, right? Depending on the ear, okay? But I think when the world of connection, and so now if they're trying to write a book, like even the ego's enemy book, I wonder if the book was more about connection, like when
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to go out and connect with people and relationship build, then maybe if you're leading
Mm-hmm.
the source or the fuel of those decision making of the decisions that you're making
Mm-hmm.
through ego, through
Mm-hmm.
self-interest, when you're connecting with others, then maybe it won't be as helpful. And to your point of harnessing it, right? Being able to cut it on. It's almost like the Hulk before he was able to control that ability,
Mm-hmm.
right? He'd walk around as the regular guy. And then, like, he was so externally reactive to everything that was what would trigger and activate him into right, losing it and going into Hulk mode. But then it was interesting. He got to a certain point of expertise and just ability and experience, right, and
Mm-hmm.
tenure and maturity to where he walked around green
Mm-hmm.
because he was able to harness it and he was like, oh, I can control it now.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can walk around as the Hulk, but I can choose how I use this aggression. I can weaponize this aggression now to use it for good, to help others, to help myself, right? But I'm not going to allow it to then be untamed to where I'm just wreaking havoc all over the place.
That makes sense.
And becoming more harmful.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It just made me think about ego as far as connecting, relationship building, or versus self-interest and like personally building ourselves.
Right.
I think it's a strength, and then it's also should be yielded wisely, you know what I mean, and craftfully when it comes to connecting with others.
Right.
But it's still a strength, so you don't want to abandon it, you don't want to put it down, you don't want to kill it. But you know what I mean? It's such a great topic because I think we're all, as we mature, trying to figure out how to get over here to where we can yield it or wield it at an expert level.
I mean, and even, one of the words we said before was subjugate. And I think another word that's good there is harness.
Yep.
Right? Like, how do you harness your ego? Like, how do you harness when you need that great sense of self, right? Like when you need to have, there's a great book called The Alter Ego Effect, right?
I love it.
Which is all about when Batman put that suit on, when Superman put that cape on, right? When, that if, and again, within the woo-woo self-help environment, everyone's like, what's your superpower? Right? Like they kind of play that game, so it's like, let's just go around the room and everyone say your superpower, right? Like, okay. Right. But at the same time, like we can scoff at it, at the same time, I understand where they're coming from.
Right, for sure.
Because it's really identifying that it's like, okay, great. You have that, then let's figure out how to take that and don't try and be Superman. You need to be Spider-Man. Because what your superpower is, you shoot some webs out your hands. Stop trying to be Superman and be Spider-Man. And I don't even know all of the Thor and I don't know in this. At the same time, there's a huge lesson to be learned there of like identifying what your superpower is and finding out what uniform to put on and then harnessing it and then remaining green when you need to, right? So it's the harness to be able to subjugate your ego and to be able to harness it and realize when you need it. Because I think little kids are great at this. Little kids just walk around and who says who they are, right? They weren't built. They haven't learned the shame of society and the guilt of bad decisions. Like they haven't learned that yet. So they just walk around, butt ass naked, walking around. Like, hey, what's going on? Like, what up? And you're like, where are your clothes?
Right.
Because they just living in the world. Like, what you mean? Like, I'm just chilling, like just eating popcorn, watching the show.
It's like
they look at it, he's like,
these are the rules of the game, man.
Like, what you doing?
Rule number one.
And it's sort of like, what can we learn from them?
Yeah.
What of that childlike energy have we lost of just living life and being like, nah, just be yourself. You know what I mean? Just be yourself. And those that, and understand the rules of where you are, but be yourself. And I think we need to harness that a lot more. And then back to what you were saying, as far as the ego, is how do we harness it, right? It's kind of like, it makes me think about another metaphor of like a horse. Like, you ever been around horses much, or like,
a little bit, enough to know.
Like during COVID, I was living on a ranch and we had horses, and one of the guys that I became friends with, he was an expert in horse training.
Oh
right?
wow.
An expert. I mean, unbelievable. Man. He was
Yeah.
like a horse whisperer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like wild.
Horses are smart.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And each of the horses, I think there was at one point 7 or 8 that were there, and it was like, well, this one does this and this one does this, and they all had these personalities. But one of the biggest common traits was just like you gotta the real strong. You gotta break the horse, right?
Yep.
The horse is your ego, right? Strong, proud, walking around like this, right? Doesn't mean you can't still have that noble steed. That noble steed will take you to where you need to go. If you can harness it, subjugate it, be like, let's know who's in charge. I'm a saddle your ass. Now I get on, and then you take me to where I need to go, which also separates out the self as being separate from the ego, which I think is a brilliant metaphor that I just came up with right now. But it's separating the ego from self. The ego could be that noble steed that you've broken, and you said, no, that's the Hulk energy, right? That was the young buck just going crazy.
Yeah, I'm separating in my mind. I'm following.
You see what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden, then when you could break it, now he could walk around green, but he could just be chilling. But he knows he has that power of the horse, because when that horse lets out, that horse is powerful. Right? When you take those racehorses, and what do racehorses have on the way into the Derby? Blinders. Chill out. Look where you're going.
So he didn't kill the ego. He just put himself in a state, or you're putting yourself in a state to where you don't respond as self egotistically.
Well, you subjugated it. You've now showed the ego that it listens to you.
Got you. Now you can use it
Correct.
as a tool. Harness it. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So what you're doing is now
you controlled it. You tamed it.
Right, my man.
Tame your ego.
The jockey is like,
got you.
The jockey is 5'2", 97 pounds. He's controlling a 900-pound beast of an animal.
It's tamed.
It's been broken. It's been tamed. It's been domesticated. It's been trained to understand and utilize its power. Could that racehorse run at that speed for hours on end? No. But it can do it for 2 minutes. I like being a sprinter.
Yep.
That I've learned that about myself. I want to be more of a sprinter. I want to sprint and catch my breath, and sprint and catch my breath. To me, I feel like that works best for me. So again, with that metaphor, if your ego is the horse, blinders, you're on top, you're leading. At the same time, people see that horse walk by and be like, damn, that's a powerful looking horse. But the horse is not out growling at people. The horse is not pounding his chest. The horse is just moving.
Doing his thing.
But moving nobly, right? Now yourself can be on top of that and be like, bet, let's go. We got to race all these other horses. You ready? Because they're not going to stop.
I like that. I even like as far as like dogs, like dog training. Because you think about when a dog is tamed. Think about a tamed dog. When somebody say, hey, my dog is tame, you don't think docile. You don't think weak. Well, that dog shows.
I think the word you might want to think is trained.
Trained, yes. Tamed in the sense of
tame. Like when I think tame, I don't think they have the capability of violence.
See, I'm on a different spectrum.
Like tame, no, here, right? It's like with tame is like, oh, he's tame. Like to me, I think of like that as like a, almost like saying he's weak. But that's how I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. That's why I'm going deeper on it. I look at tame in regards to maturity, and in regards to like maturity as far as your understanding of your ability. I think if you tame a dog, you have put broken, tamed. It's just an offset of broken, right? I think broken to me makes me feel like you've broken the aggression out of this animal, right? You can beat it around in the mouth, you can put it in a volatile situation, and it's just gonna, right? It's been told that aggression is wrong.
Right.
It's broken. It don't even govern itself, and it ain't even going to defend itself if it has to, right? When I think of tame, I think of it as a little step above, right? Maybe same area, but a step up of that animal is self-governing himself to understand, okay, I'm going to choose not to be overly aggressive with my owner, with the family members in these certain environments, in these certain atmospheres. But when somebody says, yeah, he's tame, that means, oh, okay, so it's friendly, right? But that also means that if a dog now comes into the yard, he can still attack. In my mind, that's what tame means. Train means you just listen to my command. When I tell you go, you go. I tell you sit, you sit. It could be a threatening situation, but I've trained you to shut up in threatening situations.
At the same time, I think we can be trained ourselves.
We can be trained.
Right? Like you can be trained in firearms, right? You can be trained in fighting.
Yep.
You were trained, but it doesn't mean that you're subjugated to the trainer. I think that's where we're disconnected, right? So it's like there's a trainer,
right?
But if you get trained, it's now your information, right? You're now trained in firearm safety. You're now trained in fighting. You're now trained. Versus tamed, I'm still viewing it the other way, where it's like, to me, tamed, it's like then I have someone with a leash on me. To me, tame means like, oh, he's tamed. There's a leash. So I view tame as having been subjugated, tamed the wild animal.
Yeah.
You've tamed it. It's not wild anymore.
But you know what's crazy about being tamed? Because you could say, I like that. And we're saying similar things, but just different scales at the end. It's okay to agree to disagree. I think we're just on different meanings. I look at tame as more spiritual, spirit of the animal. I look at training as more logical. I don't
disagree.
Yeah, like training is like, okay, you've been told to do this and walk this way, and you have definitive boundaries based on what I've told you to do. I think taming is over a course of actions and situations and guiding and enforcing boundaries for them to get to the point to where if your dog is tame, if you have a wild lion, we've seen enough movies. They don't technically train that lion. He's not in there with the whistle and boop, and you hear this and the lion sits like this. So I think about that like when you find a relationship connection like in the wild, that's a good metaphor of an animal being tamed, taming a wild animal to when now they're to the point to where they're choosing not to be ferocious with you, and they're tamed to the point to where their spirit now keeps them at ease at a certain level.
But then you have to, and then on top of that, you got to say to yourself, is that lion a lion anymore?
Yeah, because they'll protect.
Maybe. You don't know that. Because here's the thing is that if you've tamed the wildness out of a lion, and that lion is just living in captivity his whole life, is he really a lion anymore?
We got to look at the definition of tame.
But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because
my also viewing trained is like, if you train me physically, and you train me, to build, I take that information, but I don't subjugate myself to you as my trainer for the rest of my life.
For sure.
That's where I'm separating out. Because I believe you can be trained by things and people and experiences.
Yeah.
You then own that, and you now elevate your capability, right? So that's where I'm disconnected with the word trained. Because I think you could be trained in a number of different things in life, and then you can decide what you do with that training.
Yeah.
When I think of tame, I think of the zoo.
Yeah.
I think of the zoo.
Yeah.
I think those as tamed animals, and I can't go to zoos because I'm looking at it like, damn, like this shit's fucking depressing.
Yeah, it's another word. It's another word. I mean?
Yeah. So when I think tame, I'm like, yeah, but you're not being everything you could be because you're tame.
I agree with what you're saying, 1,000%. I disagree with. I think that the bottom end of tame is not that. I think it's a different word because I view training and tame. I think if you're tame, it doesn't mean that you've been specifically trained in shit other than how to tame your energy, your ferociousness, right?
I think harness. If you can harness that capability, because I think if you've gotten to a point of maybe taming
your ego, because they say that, right?
Yeah,
tame your ego, meaning like
At
put a lid on it.
And again, I think in between is the training you need to harness it. I think we just use all three of those words, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, you had to tame the wildness of who you are, right? You're not Tarzan anymore, motherfucker.
I like that, right?
You know what I mean? You got to tame that. Now you need to train that so you can harness it to get you where you want to go, right? And I think it's
train. You don't like
you
tame. I was gonna say train, tame, harness. I think it goes train, tame,
if you're
harness.
Gonna do tame, tame's got to be in the beginning. Tame has to be in the beginning.
I think, but
it has to be because the only way you're gonna get that lion to come to the zoo is if you dominate him, you tame him, you capture him. So you got to capture that energy. It's the only
You
way
got
you're
to
going to get him
tame
in. You
him.
got to tame
And
him.
now once he's tamed, he can
Then
be
you got to train
trained.
him.
And once he's trained, now he can know how to harness the aggression
Right.
and not be weak and
That's what
docile
I'm
and
saying.
broken. Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like they're all there.
Yeah.
But now the question is that when we look at ourselves in the mirror,
Yeah.
where do we want to be on that spectrum?
Or
So
humble.
I want to be in the harness category.
Yeah, same.
That's what I want to be. So now if I got to say to myself, what or even what of my own um activities do I need to tame? Right? Do I need to put down? Do I need to throw away? We don't have to be tamed by things. We could say, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. These are the activities I'm not going to partake in.
For sure.
You could really tame yourself.
Big time.
Seeking then the training, right? Of saying like, okay, what do I need to learn? Do I need to learn, jujitsu, more on physicality? Do I need to be trained in firearms, right? We talked about going to the range and all different things, right? Like, what do I need to be trained on? And I can take that responsibility so I can harness my power. And I think that's where we want to go to as men. And I think that if we look at it from that, and I think that was my disconnect with the word. I'm like, man, that's here.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's
I
just
like
connecting the dots.
Let's be here.
Right.
Let's not think of this as good.
Right.
Let's just think of this as like the bare minimum of
Step
survival.
one.
Right.
Maybe.
Right, exactly. So I'm like, that's cool and all, but trained is better and harnessed is even better.
It's even better, right? That's
right. So it's like
levels of mastery.
Right.
Mastering
so now,
yourself.
Right. So now it's like, okay, cool. And that's why this metaphor of seeing ourselves or seeing our ego as a horse, seeing our ego as something that can take us far. See our ego as something that can serve us, right? Anyone that knows horses and they can really break down the psychologies of these beautiful animals is like, you get a horse, he will run until he dies.
Oh yeah.
Until he collapses and dies. That is what a horse will do for it's who it's become. I don't want to say master, that's bad, right?
Right,
So like,
right.
this is my dog, you know what I mean?
Trainer, guide,
who it knows it belongs to.
Right.
And I think that's a very interesting word of like, no, my ego belongs to me. I control it. I tell her where to go.
Right.
I tell her where to run. I tell her when to shine because I'm in charge of that.
Right.
And I think that's
because a healthy ego leads to
take you to where you want
high levels of achievement.
Yes, right. Exactly.
And so it's important that we don't kill it.
Exactly.
But we have to take it through the phases of taming, training, and harnessing so that we can use it.
And the harnessing is what? The harness is the saddle. Exactly. That's why I love this metaphor now of like the ego being a horse, because you have to master your emotions, you have to master your ego, right? That's why that word's like, well, I am the master of my ego, right? Okay, cool. Because I can subjugate it, I can tame my ego first, then I can train my ego to be what and who I want it to be. Right? You ever seen the movie Incredibles? Right? In the beginning, the little kids got their superpowers. Nobody know how to use them. You know what I mean? You got Flash, little kid running around, and he's like, how do I use this? How do I harness it? Right? First, you need to tame it. Got a little baby shooting fire out its mouth or something. You got the daughter that is trying to figure out. There's a big lesson in that. The little girl is trying to figure out the force fields that she can do, right? Which is nothing that her father can do, nothing that her mother can do. Her mother's like stretchy lady or whatever it was, right? Like, so I think there's a huge life lesson metaphor in that people can take of like, okay, and I, jokingly scoffed earlier about what's your superpower, right? That they do in like the woo-woo shit. But it's the truth. It's the truth. So now it's like, okay, well, how do you identify? How do you tame it? Right? Because now you got all those in Incredibles, you got the little kid being like, look, you can't just run everywhere. It's not going to work that way. Or your Frozone or your, the spitting fire. How do you tame that? And then train that. Then they had to go to training.
Yeah.
Right? Then they had to go to training and be like, well, how do I make these force fields? Then you got to harness it. And you got to not try and be stretchy lady like your mom is. You got to understand that you can't do the stretchy stuff she can do. What you can do is you can do force fields. So how do you harness that? And I think the ego is the same thing. And I think the more that we look at mastering our ego, rather than simplistically just saying that ego is the enemy, or simplistically saying that, no, you have to kill your ego in order to get to where you want to go. Do you? Or is the key to harness your ego, to tame your ego, just to train your ego, and then to harness your ego and put a saddle on that motherfucker, and being like, you're gonna take me where I tell you to take me, because when you go to the shoot and you're 100 pounds and you're on top of a 1,000 pound horse, a thoroughbred, not a fucking donkey,
Yeah.
a thoroughbred.
It's powerful
It's
enough
powerful.
to.
It's horsepower, right? That's why
Yeah.
cars say horsepower, right? Boom, I'm in the chute. I got competition. I'm focused. I got blinders on. I'm not worried about him running his race. I'm not worried about him running. I got my blinders on. Now, how do I be like, listen, you ready to go? When we get out the chute, you're going to fucking listen to me.
You know, it's interesting. It
Boom.
also, that analogy allows you to understand how powerful it is if it's not guided or led in the right direction. If it's misled,
Yep.
it's still a powerful animal that, if it's wild and misled, can do a lot of harm and damage to you if you're on top of it. So it almost shines a light of how important it is to harness the ego, because attaching it to a horse is like, it's powerful. Mm-hmm. If it goes untrained, if it goes untamed, if it goes without a leash or harnessing, it is powerful. It can do a lot of damage. It can go all over and wreak a lot of havoc. So that's a really good way of looking at it.
Exactly.